At 35,000 feet, everything was normal. Then it wasn't. One explosion. One roll. One engine gone. The cabin went silent in a way that meant everyone understood. Then the captain's voice came through the speaker. He didn't call for a doctor. He didn't call for a pilot. He called one name. And it changed everything. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. If there is a Dr. Mara Okafor on board, Dr. Mara Okafor, please make yourself known to a flight attendant immediately. You are eating a bag of pretzels. That is what you are doing when the world changes. Not praying, not watching the mountains below, not thinking about anything important. You are eating pretzels from a small foil bag, the kind that leaves salt dust on your fingertips, and you are half watching a movie you have already seen twice, and you are somewhere over the Rocky Mountains at 35,000 feet on a Tuesday afternoon in March, and life is exactly as ordinary as it ever gets. Then the aircraft makes a sound you have never heard before. It is not turbulence. You know turbulence, that uncomfortable shimmy, the seatbelt sign, the flight attendant's rehearsed calm. This is something else entirely. This is a sound from outside the airplane that comes inside the airplane, a concussive crack that you feel in your sternum before you hear it with your ears, like standing too close to a speaker when something breaks inside it. And then the whole aircraft, not just your seat, not just your row, the entire tube of metal and fuel and human beings begins to shake in a way that feels deeply, structurally wrong. The pretzel bag leaves your hand. You do not drop it. It simply leaves. Before you watch the full story, drop a comment below telling me which country you are watching from. I want to know where in the world this is landing. And then, through the PA system, in a voice that is controlled but carrying something underneath the control, something tight and effortful, like a man lifting something very heavy while trying not to show that it is heavy, the captain says a name. One name. Just one. And you do not know who it belongs to. Not yet. Flight 529 had been exactly the kind of flight that makes people forget to be afraid of flying. Delta, Atlanta to Seattle, a 4.5-hour journey in a Boeing 737-800 that had departed Hartsfield-Jackson right on schedule at 11:42 in the morning. By 3 o'clock, you were 3 hours in, the boring middle stretch of a long flight, the part where the snack service is done and the landing still feels abstract and far away, and most people have settled into whatever private world they carry in their earphones or their paperback or their own thoughts. You are in seat 19C. Aisle seat, economy, the middle section of the aircraft where the wings are above you and the engines are close enough that their hum is a constant physical presence, a vibration you stop noticing after the first hour the same way you stop noticing the sound of a refrigerator in a quiet room. The woman in 19B, the window seat, to your left, is a retired schoolteacher named something you will not learn for several hours. She is 68 years old, wearing a soft cream cardigan and sensible shoes, and she has been knitting since before takeoff with the focused contentment of someone who has long since made her peace with everything that could go wrong in life and decided to knit through it anyway. Her headphones are in. Whatever she is listening to, it is clearly pleasant. She has not looked out the window once. Behind you, in row 20, 2 college students, boys, 20 or 21, have been conducting a low-energy argument about who feels worse. One of them went to a St. Patrick's Day party 3 days ago and has not fully recovered. The other one claims he barely drank anything but looks, from what you can see when you turned around earlier, like a person whose body is quietly rejecting the entire concept of air travel. They are going home for spring break. They are deeply, completely unbothered. One of them is asleep. Has been for most of the last hour. Outside, through the oval window across the aisle, the afternoon is extraordinary. The sky at 35,000 feet in late March over the Rockies is the specific shade of blue that does not exist at ground level, darker than you expect, almost navy at the very top where the atmosphere starts thinning, and the mountains below are still snow-capped, their peaks catching the low afternoon sun in a way that makes them look painted rather than real. The kind of afternoon that makes the idea of catastrophe feel completely impossible. The cabin smells of recycled air and the faint warmth of the overhead vents. The light through the windows is golden and calm. Everything is normal. And then it isn't. The sound comes first. There is no other way to describe it except as a cannon shot. Not a pop, not a bang, a cannon. A single tremendous percussion that comes from the right side of the aircraft, from somewhere below and behind the wing, and the pressure of it moves through the fuselage like a wave through water, and every single person on the aircraft feels it in their chest at the same moment. Then the shaking starts. An uncontained engine failure, though you do not know that term yet, is what happens when something inside a jet engine breaks in a way it was never supposed to break. A turbine blade, spinning at thousands of revolutions per minute, fractures. The centrifugal force turns that fragment into a projectile moving faster than a rifle bullet. It punches through the engine casing and into whatever is in its path. In this case, the wing structure. The hydraulic lines. The leading edge panels. You do not know any of this in the moment. What you know in the moment is that the aircraft is shaking in a way that feels like it is trying to come apart, and the shaking is getting worse, and outside the windows on the right side of the plane you can see something that should not be visible from inside an aircraft cabin: fire. Not a flicker. A bright, trailing orange glow, and behind it a stream of dark smoke bending backward in the slipstream. The aircraft rolls. This is the part that takes your brain a moment to process, because aircraft do not roll like this at cruise altitude: a sudden, violent tilt to the right, the floor tilting beneath your feet, the overhead compartments groaning, everything that was horizontal suddenly becoming diagonal. The schoolteacher's knitting, needles, yarn ball, the small project she had been working on, simply lifts off her lap and hangs in the air for a long, impossible moment before the pilots fight the aircraft back toward level and it falls again. Your coffee cup is gone. You did not see it go. It is simply no longer on your tray table. The oxygen masks drop from the ceiling panel above you with a clatter of plastic, swinging on their clear tubes, and this, more than the sound, more than the shaking, more than the smoke outside, is the image that locks something cold and specific in your chest, because oxygen masks are the thing they show you in the safety demonstration, the thing they tell you about in that calm practiced voice, the thing that exists in the category of things that never actually happen, and here they are. Swinging gently in front of your face in all their yellow plastic reality. Around you, the cabin erupts. Not all at once. It happens in layers: first the people on the right side who saw the fire, who were already screaming before the roll, and then the people who felt the roll and looked up and saw the masks and started screaming then, and then the people who are trying to call someone, fingers moving over phone screens with desperate speed, and the 2 college students behind you who have gone from hungover and half asleep to completely, soberly awake in about 4 seconds flat. The schoolteacher beside you has taken her headphones out. She is sitting very still, looking straight ahead, and her hands, those knitting hands, steady and practiced, are folded in her lap. The aircraft continues to descend. Not a freefall, controlled, but steep, 3,000 feet per minute, the nose pitched down in a way that is purposeful and deliberate but that feels, from inside the cabin, like falling. The engines, the one remaining engine, is at a different pitch now, working harder, a sound that is present and loud and constant and somehow reassuring in its consistency, because it means something is still running. Then the PA system clicks on. Captain's voice. You will think about this voice for a long time afterward, the way it carries both the truth of what is happening and the deliberate, chosen steadiness of a man who has decided that his voice will be a wall between his passengers and the worst of what he knows. There is a controlled roughness to it, like he is speaking through clenched jaw muscles that he is consciously working to unclench. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Osei. We have experienced a serious mechanical issue with one of our engines. We are diverting and descending to an alternate airport immediately. Please keep your seatbelts fastened, follow the instructions of our cabin crew, and remain seated. We are working the situation. Working the situation. A phrase so measured, so deliberately stripped of drama, that it tells you everything about how serious things are. And then, After a pause, just a beat, just long enough that you wonder if the PA has cut out, he says a name. Dr. Mara Okafor. If Dr. Mara Okafor is on board, please make yourself known to a flight attendant immediately. And then nothing. The PA clicks off. One name. Over the passenger address system. In the middle of an emergency at 35,000 feet over the Rocky Mountains. Something no captain had ever done on any flight you had ever taken. The woman who stands up from seat 7B does not look like anyone's last hope. She looks like a professor on her way to a conference, which is exactly what she is. Mid-40s, Nigerian American, natural hair pulled back with the kind of practicality that suggests she forgot about it before boarding and hasn't thought about it since. She is wearing a Georgia Tech sweatshirt, faded, well-loved, the kind of clothing you wear when you are not trying to be anything for anyone. Her reading glasses are pushed up onto her forehead. She is carrying a worn leather notebook, the kind with a strap closure and pages that have expanded with use, stuffed with loose papers and folded printouts. She stands from her business class seat and begins walking toward the cockpit, and you can see her from row 19 because the cabin has gone to that particular breathless stillness that falls when everyone realizes that something is happening, that someone knows something, and that the someone is walking toward the front of the plane. A flight attendant, young, professional, managing her own fear with the visible effort of someone squeezing a bruise and not reacting, steps into the aisle to intercept her. Regulations. Protocol. No one goes to the cockpit. No one. The woman in the sweatshirt reaches into the pocket of her notebook and produces something. A card. She speaks 2 sentences, quietly, and you cannot hear them from row 19, but you can see the flight attendant's face change, something registering, something shifting from rule follower to situation reader, and she steps aside. Dr. Mara Okafor continues toward the cockpit. She does not run. She does not look around at the passengers watching her. She walks with the particular focused calm of someone doing a calculation in their head, and you get the sense that she has already started, that her mind entered the problem before she stood up, and that the walking is just logistics. Here is what you would not learn until you were sitting in the terminal afterward, phone in hand, piecing together the story from overheard conversations and news alerts and a flight attendant who was willing to talk. Mara Okafor has spent 22 years as a professor of aerospace engineering at Georgia Tech. But before that, before the lectures and the office hours and the published papers and the department meetings, she spent 11 years at Boeing. Structural engineering. Specifically, wing and engine integration on the 737 and 757 series. The work that happens before the aircraft exists, the work that happens on paper and in computer models and in testing labs, the work that answers the question, what holds the engine to the wing, and what happens to everything else when it goes wrong. She worked on the engine pylon, the structural component that connects the engine to the wing, that transfers the enormous forces of thrust into the aircraft structure, that has to perform under conditions ranging from perfectly normal to catastrophically abnormal. On multiple 737 variants. Across years of design iterations and safety reviews and certification testing. She does not know how to fly this aircraft. She has never held a pilot's license. If you put her in the captain's seat, the aircraft would not survive. That is not what she is here for. What she knows in the specific, precise, quantifiable way that only comes from being one of the people who designed the answers, is what this aircraft can survive. What forces are acting on the damaged wing at this moment? How much stress the remaining structure can bear before the calculations change from survivable to unsurvivable? What the pilots can ask of this aircraft and what they cannot. She has 2 published papers, both cited regularly in Boeing's internal safety training, specifically on uncontained engine failure and its structural consequences. What happens to a wing when a turbine blade exits the engine? How the damage propagates. Where the limits are. The captain who called her name is David Osei. 54 years old, 26 years with Delta, the kind of experience that lives in his hands and his body rather than just his mind. 8 years ago, he attended a Boeing safety seminar, a continuing education requirement, the kind of thing experienced pilots do to stay current on aircraft systems and failure modes, and one of the instructors was a professor from Georgia Tech. She said something that day. He has carried it for 8 years. The aircraft will always tell you what it needs. You just have to know how to listen. When the engine failed, when the warning systems cascaded and the aircraft rolled and he fought at level and silenced the most urgent alarms and began working the emergency, he pulled up the passenger manifest on the system display. Something that pilots sometimes do in medical emergencies, looking for doctors. He was looking for an engineer. And there she was. 7B. He had recognized her name immediately. In 26 years of flying, the manifest had never contained a name he recognized from anywhere except other flights. The probability of her being on this specific aircraft, on this specific afternoon, with this specific failure, defies the mathematics of coincidence. She was going to a conference in Seattle. She had booked the flight 6 weeks ago. He called her name because she was the only person on the aircraft who might know what the wing could still do. She stayed in aerospace, years ago, when she almost didn't. Her daughter had just been born and she was exhausted in the specific, cellular way that new parents are exhausted, and she looked at the work and the travel and the endless calculations and thought about becoming a high school physics teacher, thought about smaller scale, closer consequence, more visible gratitude. A mentor talked her out of it, not with money or prestige, but with a simple observation: the field needs people who care about why things fail. Most people only care if they fail. She cared about the why. She stayed. And now she is walking into a cockpit at 35,000 feet over Colorado, leather notebook under her arm, ink already on her left hand from writing something on the way up the aisle. The cockpit of a commercial aircraft in an emergency is not chaos. That is the first thing that surprises her, not the warning lights, not the sound of the single remaining engine, not the physical sensation of the aircraft wanting to roll right and being continuously, manually corrected. It is the order. The trained, deliberate order of 2 people who have practiced for this and are now living it. Captain David Osei is hand-flying the aircraft. He has the controls in both hands, making constant small corrections, the kind of muscular attention that is invisible from outside the cockpit but would be exhausting to maintain for an hour. He does not take his eyes from the instruments when she enters. He says, without turning, "Dr. Okafor. Thank you for coming." First Officer James Whitfield is managing the radio, talking in the clipped, information-dense language of aviation communications with Denver Center, the air traffic control facility responsible for this airspace, while simultaneously monitoring the engine systems and tracking their fuel state. He is 38 years old, precise and efficient, and he glances at her once when she enters, a quick assessment, and then returns to the radio. The right engine is off. Shut down during the first 60 seconds of the emergency, fire suppression activated and confirmed, the engine fire warning lights are out, which is good, which is the first good thing. But the engine departure has done other damage. The leading edge of the right wing, the panels and mechanisms along the front of the wing that shape the airflow and house the slats, the movable surfaces that extend for takeoff and landing, has been compromised. More critically, the hydraulic lines running along the right side of the aircraft have been damaged. Not severed completely, but partially, enough that the flight control surfaces on the right side are responding sluggishly, requiring more input than normal, with a delay that would be invisible in normal operations and is enormously significant right now. The aircraft is flyable. This is the first thing to understand: it is still flyable. One engine, partial hydraulics, a wing that is damaged but intact, flyable. But not in the way it was designed to be flown. Not with normal approach speeds and flap configurations and landing weights. The envelope has changed. The question is how, and by exactly how much, and who knows the answer. Captain Osei turns from the instruments for the first time since she entered. 30 seconds. He gives her 30 seconds of the clearest, most concise situational briefing she has ever received from anyone who was not a structural engineer. Engine fire and departure, right side. Fire suppressed. Hydraulic degradation, right flight control circuit. Currently maintaining flight on left engine. Descending through 28,000. Passengers briefed on emergency. Requesting divert. She does not interrupt. She listens with the specific quality of attention that belongs to people who are confirming a model they have already begun building in their mind, checking each new data point against the picture forming behind their eyes. Then she asks 3 questions. What's your current fuel load and burn rate on the left engine? He reads the numbers from the display. She writes them in her notebook. Are the flaps responding symmetrically or is there a lag on the right side? Whitfield answers this one without looking up from the radio, right side lag. Approximately 2 to 3 seconds behind left on extension commands. She writes. What did the ICAs show in the first 10 seconds before you silenced it? ICAs, the engine indication and crew alerting system, the display that tells pilots what is happening inside the aircraft's major systems. He tells her what it showed. She writes without looking at the page, the practiced handwriting of someone whose hands know the letters even when the eyes are elsewhere. 45 seconds of writing. The cockpit makes its sounds, the engine, the instruments, Whitfield's voice on the radio, the continuous subtle movement of the controls as Osei keeps the aircraft from doing what its damaged aerodynamics want it to do, which is roll right, always right. She looks up. The wing will hold, she says. The primary structure is intact. What you're feeling in the controls is the hydraulic degradation and asymmetric drag from the leading edge damage, not structural instability. It will hold. She pauses. But there are conditions. She gives them the conditions in the language of engineering, which is the language of limits. Speed limits. They cannot exceed a specific airspeed without increasing aerodynamic load on the damaged leading edge to a point where the already compromised structure might fail. Bank angle limits, no more than 15 degrees of bank, because greater bank angles load the wing asymmetrically in a way that could propagate the existing damage. Flap limits, partial extension only, 30 degrees maximum, because full flap extension on both sides with a sluggish right side creates an asymmetric lift situation that would require corrective input that their partially hydraulic compromised controls might not be able to provide reliably. This changes your approach configuration, she says. You'll be landing fast. Higher reference speed than normal. You need the longest suitable runway you can reach. She opens to a page in her notebook where she has already done the calculation, the revised landing reference speed, accounting for their current weight, the partial flap limitation, the asymmetric aerodynamic situation. She shows him the number. It is higher than normal by a margin that means something in practical terms. They will touch down moving faster than a 737 normally touches down, decelerating over a longer distance, requiring more runway than a standard landing. Salt Lake City, she says. They have the runway length you need. Current weather is acceptable. Emergency equipment will be there. Captain Osei is silent for a moment. Not a long moment, he does not have long moments right now. Denver is 40 miles closer. With our fuel state. I know. She turns her notebook to show him the fuel calculation alongside the runway calculation. Denver's longest runway works at normal approach speeds. At these speeds, with these margins, it does not. If we have to go around at Denver, any reason, wind, traffic, anything, we may not have the fuel for a second approach. She does not raise her voice. She does not add drama. She states it the way she would state it to a colleague, the way she would write it in a paper. Here is the data, here is what the data says, here is what the data means. Osei looks at the numbers. He looks at them for 4 seconds, which is a long time in this cockpit right now. Then he looks at Whitfield. Denver Center, Delta 529, requesting vectors to Salt Lake City International. Emergency in progress. Whitfield reads it back and transmits it, and just like that the geometry of their flight changes, the aircraft bending south and west toward a valley ringed by mountains and a runway long enough to absorb what they are bringing in. The three of them find a rhythm in the next 38 minutes that is not friendship and not exactly professional distance but something in between. the particular trust of people whose competencies fit together without overlap. She calls parameters, narrating the aircraft's structural condition based on the data she can see and the knowledge she carries. Whitfield manages every radio frequency, every system check, every communication with Salt Lake approach control, his voice never wavering. Osei flies. He flies with his whole body, a continuous physical conversation with an aircraft that is having the worst day of its operational life and still, doing what it was built to do. She built part of what it is doing right now. She knows this. She does not say it. In seat 19C, you do not know any of this. You know that a woman walked to the cockpit. You know that the aircraft is descending. You know that one engine is making sound and the other one is not, though you cannot see the right side from your seat and the passengers who can have stopped filming and are now mostly sitting very still and looking at their hands or the seat backs in front of them. The schoolteacher in 19B has put her knitting away. Somewhere in the last 10 minutes, you did not see exactly when, she reached over and took your hand. You did not ask her to. She just did it, with the matter-of-fact tenderness of someone who has held the hands of 20-year-olds on bad days for 4 decades, and you did not pull away, and you are grateful in a way that goes past language. Behind you, the 2 college students have stopped competing about their hangovers. One of them, you can hear the notification sounds, small soft chimes, over and over, is texting his mother. You can tell it is his mother from the rhythm of it, long message sent, short reply, long message sent. The other one is silent. Across the aisle, a man in his 50s was filming out the window 20 minutes ago. He has put his phone down. Where the right engine was, there is a shape that is wrong, even from this distance, even through the oval window, you can tell the geometry of the wing is not what it was when you boarded this morning in Atlanta. There is smoke still trailing, faint now, and a visual absence where there should be an engine nacelle, like a gap in a sentence where a word should be. 2 rows ahead of you, a little girl, 6, maybe 7, sitting next to her father, has been asking him the same question at irregular intervals since the oxygen masks dropped. Are we going to be okay? Are we going to be okay, Daddy? And he says yes, each time, in a voice that is warm and steady and carries underneath it something that is not steadiness at all, something that is a father working very hard at the most important performance of his life. The flight attendants move through the cabin with a professionalism that you will think about afterward, will think about a lot. They are afraid. You can see it in the set of their shoulders, in the way their smiles are slightly too fixed, in the small tells of people who are managing something large and keeping the management invisible. They give information. They check seatbelts. They make eye contact in a way that means I see you, I am here, we are in this together, and it is not acting, it is a form of courage you did not have a name for before this afternoon. At some point, the aircraft shudders. Just turbulence. Regular mountain wave turbulence at this altitude, the kind that happens all the time, the kind you would not have noticed this morning. But every person in the cabin grabs something, the seat arm, the tray table, the hand of the person next to them, and holds, all at once, like a collective flinch, and then the shudder passes and everyone breathes again, and the silence that returns is different from the silence before it, denser and more deliberate, the silence of people who are paying fierce attention to everything. You think, in this silence, about a specific afternoon. Not your whole life, not the moments you might expect to review when things go wrong. Just one afternoon, about 3 years ago, a Sunday in October, when you were sitting in a kitchen with someone you love and the light was coming through the window at exactly this angle and you were drinking coffee and not talking much, and it was completely ordinary, and you did not know then that you were storing it, that some part of you was filing it away for exactly this kind of moment. You want that afternoon back. That is all you want. That exact afternoon, unremarkable, unlost. The aircraft descends through the clouds. The first sign of Salt Lake City is the grid. You see it from the window across the aisle, the person sitting there has pressed their face close to the glass, and you can see past them to the valley below, the extraordinary sight of a city laid out in the perfect geometry of streets and blocks, the Great Salt Lake glinting silver in the late afternoon sun to the northwest, and the mountains, still snow-covered, ringing the valley on every side like a crowd watching. The approach takes 11 minutes from when you first see the city. During those 11 minutes, the aircraft is flying differently from any landing you have experienced. The speed is higher, you can feel it, a different quality to the air noise, the particular rushing sound of a 737 moving faster than it normally moves at this altitude, and the ride is not smooth, because Captain Osei is making continuous corrections with an aircraft that is not behaving the way it was designed to behave, one hand always slightly more loaded than the other, the left input constant and deliberate. And then you see the runway. More specifically, you see what is on either side of the runway. Fire trucks. Ambulances. Emergency vehicles of every category, lights running in the pre-evening light, a sea of red and blue and white strobing, and the vehicles are spaced along the runway like an honor guard, like a corridor, like every piece of emergency equipment Salt Lake City International Airport owns and some it probably borrowed. From above, from the angle of final approach, it is simultaneously the most terrifying thing you have ever seen, because seeing that much emergency equipment means someone knows how serious this is, and the most beautiful, because all of those lights mean all of those people, all of those hands and knowledge and equipment ready to help. Inside the cockpit, Dr. Okafor is calling parameters in a steady rhythm. Airspeed is within limits. Structural load acceptable at current bank. Right side lag is consistent, no change. You're in good shape, David. She has used his first name. She does not know when she started. He doesn't either. He is flying with every bit of 26 years. The aircraft wants to go right. It always wants to go right, now. He keeps the left input constant, keeps the nose on the extended center line of the runway, keeps the airspeed where she has told him it needs to be, higher than normal, yes, but within the envelope she has calculated, and she has calculated it from the inside, from the equations that were there when this aircraft was born. Whitfield on the radio, Salt Lake, Delta 529, 4 miles final, gear down, landing checklist complete. The ground comes up. It always comes up faster than you expect on final approach, but today it comes up faster than that, because they are faster than normal, and the runway threshold passes under the nose and the tires meet the asphalt with a force that goes through the entire aircraft, not a landing, a collision, the controlled, calculated collision of a wounded machine with the ground it has been trying to reach for the last 45 minutes. The reverse thrust engages. The sound is enormous. The deceleration pushes everyone forward against their seatbelts, and it continues, and continues, and the runway markers blur past the windows, and you can see through the window across the aisle the emergency vehicles beginning to move, beginning to pace the aircraft down the runway, and then stillness. Complete, abrupt, total stillness. The aircraft has stopped. It does not roll to the gate. It does not taxi. It stops, with finality, on the runway, in the middle of a corridor of emergency vehicles with their lights still running, and the engines spin down, and there is silence. 2 seconds. Maybe 3. You count them later, trying to remember. 2 or 3 seconds of absolute, complete silence in a cabin of 164 people, and then the schoolteacher beside you makes a sound. You have never heard this sound from another human being before and you do not have a word for it. It is not a word, it is not a cry, it is something that lives underneath both of those things, something purely physical and purely human, the sound of a body releasing what it has been holding. And then everyone is making sounds, all at once, crying and laughing and calling names and grabbing each other across armrests and across the aisle, and the college student behind you says something you can't quite hear through the noise and his voice is cracking, and the little girl 2 rows ahead says daddy and her father says yes yes yes, and the flight attendants, those extraordinary professionals who have been managing their own fear for 45 minutes while managing everyone else's, are holding each other at the front of the cabin, briefly, just for a moment, before they straighten and reach for the PA system and begin the evacuation announcement. The slides deploy. The doors open to Utah air, cold and real and carrying the smell of jet fuel and asphalt and, somewhere underneath it, the specific cleanness of high desert air in March. You go down the slide. You do not remember making the decision to go down the slide, you are simply doing it, the yellow plastic smooth and fast, and then you are on the tarmac, and the cold hits your face, and your legs feel uncertain beneath you in the way legs feel when they are relearning what solid ground means. You stand on the runway. Around you, people are sitting down, some of them right there on the tarmac, and the emergency vehicles are close now, paramedics moving through the crowd with the efficient gentleness of people who know what the body does after extreme fear. The mountains ring the valley. The sun is getting lower, painting the snow on the peaks orange. You are alive on a Tuesday in March in Salt Lake City, and it is the most specific, particular, vivid alive you have ever been. In the terminal, word moves the way it always moves after something like this, in fragments, in whispers, in the small urgent exchanges of people who have just survived something together and are still figuring out what it was. The flight attendant, not the one who stopped Dr. Okafor, the other one, the one who was in the back of the cabin, sits down across from you in the terminal holding a cup of tea she isn't drinking, and she tells you what she overheard, what she knows. She built part of this plane, she says. She knew exactly what it could take. You sit with this for a moment. A woman in a Georgia Tech sweatshirt with ink on her hands and a worn leather notebook knew exactly what the wing could take. Because she was one of the people who decided what it could take. Because she spent years, before the lectures, before the papers, before the students, doing the calculations. Sitting at a desk somewhere in a Boeing facility, running the numbers on what an engine pylon has to survive, what forces it has to transmit, what failure modes it has to be designed around. She never expected to be on the aircraft. She never expected to be needed. She was going to a conference. Passengers have gathered her name now, piece by piece, and the reactions move through the terminal in waves. Disbelief first, she's an engineer. Not a pilot. She can't fly the plane. And then a stranger, more complicated emotion, the particular disorientation of learning that the person who saved you was not someone in a uniform with a title you recognize, but someone in a sweatshirt with a notebook, carrying 22 years of knowledge that happens to precisely match the shape of the emergency. You find her near gate C11. She is sitting alone, facing the window that overlooks the tarmac where Delta 529 is still parked, surrounded now by NTSB trucks and airport vehicles and people in vests carrying cases of equipment. She is writing in her notebook. Still writing. You wonder if she ever stops. You do not approach her to thank her. You are not sure you could find the words, and you are not sure she wants words. You sit down 2 seats away from her, in the row of black chairs facing the window, because being near her feels like the right thing to do, the way being near a fire feels right when you are cold. She looks up. Just briefly. She looks at you, and then at the aircraft through the window, and she says something quietly, not performing it, not narrating it, just saying it, the way you might say something true about a person you have known for a long time. It was a good wing. I always thought it was a good wing. You look at her hands. You cannot help it. They are the hands of someone who has spent decades writing calculations, steady and ink-stained, a blue smear along the side of the left palm from whatever she has been writing in the last hour. They are completely still. They are the stillest hands in the terminal. Captain David Osei comes through the jetway doors 20 minutes later. Still in his uniform, still carrying the weight of the last hour on his face. He moves through the terminal and people try to approach him and he is kind and brief, moving with purpose. He finds her. They embrace, briefly. Not a dramatic embrace, a real one, the kind that carries information in it, the kind where what passes between two people cannot be said out loud. He says something into the conversation between them, low. She nods. He puts one hand on her shoulder for a moment and then they step apart, and he goes back to the work of being a captain, the paperwork, the statements, the beginning of the long official process. The NTSB investigators have arrived. 3 of them, moving with brisk efficiency, carrying aluminum cases and badges. They will spend months on what happened this afternoon. Their report will almost certainly cite 2 papers by a professor from Georgia Tech on uncontained engine failures. She will probably be asked to consult. She is already writing notes for it. The replacement flight to Seattle departs at 9:40 the following morning. Different aircraft. Different crew. Clear skies over the mountains, which look, from this altitude, exactly as they looked yesterday afternoon before anything happened, peaceful and white-capped and ancient. You are in a window seat this time. You ask for it. You want to see the wing. You look at the wing for a long time. The way the light catches the aluminum. The way the engine hangs from the pylon in its particular geometry, so familiar you would never normally notice it, the way you never notice any of the 10,000 things that are working correctly at any given moment. Someone designed this. Someone sat at a desk and did the calculations and ran the simulations and argued with colleagues and lost sleep over tolerances. Someone decided how much force this pylon has to transmit, and what happens at the limits, and where the limits are, and why. Someone cared about this specific question for years before this wing ever carried anyone anywhere. We move through the world surrounded by invisible expertise. Not the expertise of the famous or the recognized, the expertise of the people whose work lives in the things we touch and trust without ever thinking about them. The engineer who designed the bridge you crossed this morning. The structural analyst who decided how thick the walls of the building you work in have to be. The researcher who spent 15 years studying a failure mode that has never occurred and now never will because of work no one outside a very small field will ever know was done. We fly on wings that were built by people who are not on the aircraft. Except for yesterday. Yesterday, one of them was. The coincidence still does not feel real. A professor books a flight she almost did not take. A captain remembers a name from a seminar 8 years ago. An engine fails over the Rockies on a Tuesday afternoon. The manifest contains her name. There is no lesson in this. Or if there is, it is not a comfortable one. The comfortable lesson would be that expertise finds its way to where it is needed, that the world balances out, that safety is built in. But the real lesson, if there is one, is that on most flights, on most days, when something fails, there is no Mara Okafor in 7B. The expertise lives in the aircraft itself, in the redundant systems and the certification testing and the structural margins and the thousands of small decisions made by people who will never be on board. We fly because of the ones who are not there. The Rockies are below you now. You are at cruising altitude, the wing outside your window steady and clean in the morning light. You think about what a wing actually is, not the physics, but the fact of it, that human beings, over years of work, cared enough to build something that lifts other human beings off the ground and brings them down again, safely, over and over, in conditions no one perfectly planned for. A good wing. You look at it for a long time. The way the light catches it. The way it holds. Delta Flight 529 is a fictionalized account inspired by real aviation engineering principles and emergency procedures. All characters are fictional. The structural and engineering details are based on real aerospace concepts.